And there we go. And turn it over a little bit that way, where the engine crane is. All right, so there is quite a bit to remove in order to get the engine out. There we go, now it should be much better to get it out. Welcome back to Living with a Classic and the engine removal for my daily driver XJ6 behind me here. This is part 2. If you missed part 1, I put a link to it down below so you can watch that before if you want to. So this basically drops or continues right where part 1 dropped off. I've only done one thing off camera, and that is loosen off everything underneath for the transmission. But I'll show you basically what I've done. But it was too tight under there to film. I don't want to damage the camera. But that's it. Otherwise, there's still, alternator left to do, power steering pump, exhaust, a couple more cables, and fan shroud, and it should be ready. Oh yeah, and oil cooler, and it should be ready to take this engine out. I'm going to try and show underneath here basically what I've done. I have loosened the transmission mount, 4 bolts there. It's the big spring-loaded thing. I removed the speedo cable. I removed the gear selector cable, and that's pretty much it. I tried to get the bolts out on the drive shaft there, but they're really stuck on there, and then I felt that it is a slip joint behind there, so I think that will come apart. Otherwise, we'll figure that out a little bit later, but the rest of it is fine. And if you want to know anything about these transmission mounts, I have done a video on servicing them on an XJS. It's a very similar mount, it's just a little bit different, but it's spring loaded and everything is the same. So if you want to know more about that, I'll put a link to that down below. But now let's go up and I'll have to remove the rest of the things in the engine bay. I've moved the car forward into position to get the crane to be able to get the engine out, but still a lot to remove. So I'm going to put on some good music, just quickly remove the last things, and then we can finally lift this thing out. There we go. Getting pretty close now. And we just hook this thing up so you can get it a little bit further in. Alright, some slight adjustments, and that's in place. Pretty much everything is disconnected. The only thing I didn't show you guys was I of course disconnected the main earth cable. It's basically down below the starter. And I also disconnected the electrics over by the starter. For the other electrics, I'm lucky there's a multi-plug, and I unplugged that one. But otherwise, not a big deal. There's hardly anything on this engine. They're very simple. And I really do think it's this. This is it. Exhaust is off. Everything else. I've also disconnected the cooler lines from the transmission up front, and I plugged them. And yeah, I removed, as you saw, the lower front grille as well, just to not damage it. So it's really just has to go up a little bit to clear the sump, and then it can go pretty much straight back. However, we have the motor mounts left, and they're very simple. It's just one nut on each side. So I'll undo those now, and then we can start lifting. But before I undo them, I just want to put a little bit of tension on it in case the engine slips back a little bit. So the transmission is loose when I loosen the engine mount. So there we go. It's just a little bit of tension on it. I'll just lower 2 engine mounts, and then we'll start raising it up. So everything should be disconnected now, and hopefully it should come out. But you never know, there might be something you forget. So I'm going to try and lift it a little bit up front just to get it off the motor mounts, and then I don't want to lean it too much so it hits the firewall. I just want to maybe get it to start coming forward. So we'll see how it goes. Alright, it's coming off the motor mounts on this side. It's all clear on this side, and almost clear on that side. I would call that clear on both sides now. See if I can even. No, it's pretty stuck in there. Remember last time I used this thing, I decided to cut this off because it kept getting in the way. So I don't have a handle, so I'm just going to get a wrench on here and start leaning the back down a little bit. There we go, I got it just forward a little bit. Now I need to get it up because of the sump. So you get it. The sump goes above the power steering rack, which it's doing right now. And it's just the oil cooler lines here, or the lines for the transmission. And it is definitely wanting to come forward. Gonna make sure that there's nothing snagging on it here in the back, because over here it feels like you always get cables and stuff getting stuck. And it seems like we're coming free. Definitely. So we got the sump down here on the engine mount a bit. I'll bring you guys in for a close look so you can see how it's going like halfway. So here it is, making great progress. Put a bit of light down here. You can see the sump there is just sort of on the engine mount right there. So that's the next step. But we got plenty of room back here with the transmission. There's a long thing, it has the mount on it. So it still needs to lean back a bit, so I may need to tilt the engine a little bit more, but we'll see. It's easier to show on the engine over here. You can see that the hump the sump makes over the subframe. So over here you have the subframe, power steering rack, so that's what I was getting over. So yeah, making great progress. It's a bit better on this side, but it's just because of the angle from the hooks there. It's not going to be an issue at all. And as you can see, you don't have to lift it a lot to get one of these out, especially if you remove everything from the front. So I think a couple more minutes and this should be out. Okay, time to put gloves back on. I've gotten really good at using gloves now. Sort of proud of myself. I mean, got to throw these away pretty soon, but I get these pretty flexible mechanical gloves, so they're nitrile on this side, so good against oil, and then normal cloth on the other side, and I think it works really well. I get less cuts on my hands, and I don't look like a dirty mechanic all the time, so I think that is a good thing. And now we are, I think, completely dangling free. Definitely. I actually think we can go back a little bit right now. transmission is clear from the transmission tunnel, and we can start leveling things off again. Hope we bring you guys in for a closer look. Transmission is free from the tunnel now, so we can basically just go up there. Time to change the level because we're sitting almost about to touch the cross member here where the bell housing it. So change the level a little bit again. And just try to remember which way I need to go. That's the wrong way. Alright, well, one thing you will notice is, even though it is just a 6, even though it's still a big engine 4.2, it is a heavy beast with that transmission and everything. But this thing can definitely take it. It's well rated for it, but you can tell that it's quite a beast to level compared to when I had an AJ V8 on here, all over the V8 without this, or yeah, with the transmission. That was a big difference compared to this. Okay, we got the back of the transmission. It's almost about to touch the top of the transmission tunnel again, but it does seem that we're pretty much free. So at least go forward a little bit. Now let's see. Now we're all the way free from the transmission tunnel. So we can lift it up a bit. And since I don't have the highest ceiling in the world, I am going to level it up, or level it out a little bit more. There we go. Now I should be able to roll it back a bit more. And yeah, that is going to clear, but we'll just raise it a tiny bit more. Now I just kind of juggle it over here a bit because we're a little bit tight on space. And oh, we're almost clear. And that's it. What a beast of an engine. It looks absolutely massive when it's hanging up there in the air. I will lower it down on the ground, just put some cardboard underneath it. It doesn't leak anything, but you never know. I don't want to make too much of a mess on the ground, but yeah, I mean, it looks massive, even though, like I said, it's just a 6. It's a pretty big 6-cylinder engine. And if you have been following along, this is a Series 3 engine that was swapped into this car at some point along with the Series 3 transmission. It's a Borg-Warner 66. Series 2 had the Borg-Warner 65, pretty much the same transmission from the outside, just some small differences inside. And this thing has an internal crack in cylinder 2 in the cylinder wall or somewhere around there. It's not in the head, so it is coolant is spraying into cylinder number 2, and that's why we've tried 2 head gaskets and finally looked inside with a borescope and saw that. Did try some other things as well, just for fun, because we had nothing to lose with this engine and it was just a fun thing on the channel. But now it's time for a new engine in the daily driver. Sitting over here, it is a known good engine we will go through in a future video. When I take the parts I need from this engine to put onto this one, including the transmission, I will be using this transmission. I'm a big fan of The 65 and 66, I think they shift very nicely and nice transmissions to drive. This is a BorgWarner 12, and I mean, it's a very, very strong transmission, but it's just kind of overly heavy and tend to leak, in my opinion, a little bit more than these two. So happy to swap that over. Engine bay looks pretty good, I say. I mean, it's definitely not a show car. This is a daily driver. So I will clean it up a little bit more. They always get oily and grimy over here, especially around that engine mount and around the power steering rack, because whenever you take off an oil filter, if you're not too careful, oil will pour down there. I mean, even if you're very careful, oil will pour down over here. So that's been going on for probably 45, 46 years. Otherwise, I haven't decided yet completely. We'll see. I will definitely clean up the engine bay, but maybe I will do some painting. It would be the ideal time to paint the engine bay, because when am I going to remove the engine again? In hopefully a long time. But once again, it is a daily driver, so I may just, I mean, this is really the worst of it in the engine bay right there. This is just dust and that's covered up. So I don't know, maybe I may sort of rust proof from here down with rust proofing paint, clean the rest of it off, and go from there. We'll see. But I do have quite a bit of cleaning up to do now. I've just spent, what is it, not 3 full days, but 3 days in my spare time pulling that engine and pulling this one. So I'm a little tired and I have a lot of cleaning up to do in the workshop, but it's been a lot of fun. Anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed this video and saw that it's really not that big of a deal to pull one of these engines. I mean, it's a lot of stuff to disconnect around here, but some of it, I mean, you can leave more stuff on than I took off. You can leave carbs on and stuff. It's just, that's what I chose to remove. But I will say one thing, from when I started lifting with the crane, so it was hooked up and I started pumping it up, until I switched off the camera and the engine was out of the car, that was 11 minutes. And that was with me stopping, talking to the camera, filming different angles and doing things. So I mean, realistically, less than 10 minutes to once it's on the crane just to pull it out. And that's because you can really disassemble the front so much on these cars that it's quite simple to get them out. But big heavy beasts when they're out, and they do take quite a bit of space. But anyways, I hope you guys liked this video and that you saw that it's not that big of a deal to take these out. So if you do need to remove your engine for some reason, for paint or anything else, you can do it. It's not too difficult. One thing I will mention, I did, let me see if you can see that here on the transmission. It did separate from the yoke there like I thought it would. It just, I couldn't remember exactly. But what I have done, I've marked them on both of them so they will go together in the same point. I've also pulled the parking brake extremely hard on the car and I'm not moving it. So drive shaft will be in the same position. I've also put the transmission in park. So theoretically, even without the marks, they should slide together and be in the same place because they're probably balanced in that sense. So that's something to think about as well. There's probably a lot of other things to think about, but hopefully you guys liked this video. So if you did, please give it a thumbs up, share it with friends. If you're not already subscribed to the channel, please do subscribe to the channel. It really does help out a lot. Until next time, I'm Adam. This was Living with a Classic. I'll see you soon.